everyone, welcome back to On the Other Hand. I'm Ariane Zurcher, and in today's video I am beginning to build my third sphere of my Suspended Worlds series. This one I'm calling What Remains. In my last video I spoke about the long road of recovery, in my case of an eating disorder, and this video feels like a continuation of that conversation, in that it's about what happens after a turning point, a large change, whether we intend for it to occur or not, and what remains, as well as what we choose to carry forward. So I'll turn you around and we'll get started. A quick conversation about the wire I'm using. So it's really important for the base, whatever my base is, and I'm working on my third sphere now, to use galvanized wire. It's got to be galvanized because it's going to be stronger than craft wire, typically called craft wire. This is craft wire. Do you see how bendy it is? Really easy to bend. Then I use a 20 gauge for some of the smaller little bits that I want to put inside. But to wrap, you can use craft wire because it's really easy to wrap around. So I've got my wire here, my galvanized wire, and now I'm going to add my wrapped wire, which is, I'm just using a craft wire. I don't usually do this in front of a camera, so it's a little bit trickier. And I want to get this scooted down. Okay, and now I'm going to do this as tightly as I can. Do you see how easy it is to push it together? And then I'm going to push this all together. And now I'm going to just press it really hard. And hopefully trick is to really wrap this tightly. I need to wrap it as tightly as I possibly can. And then I can clip this off. So that's what I've used the craft wire for. The only problem with the craft wire is it's pretty flimsy, and I've really cinched it, and if you cinch it too much, it can just start crumbling. But you can see it's pretty tightly in there. The interior of the sculpture, for me, has to be galvanized because it's gonna just all collapse on me. It needs to be sturdy enough, and galvanized is the only wire that really is. So that's what I use. I wanted to show you the sphere so far. This is something I made, by the way, with this one, which is sticky, which is a real, mess when you're trying to do your free motion stitching. I mean, I have anti-glue needles, but even that, because I had to put 2 layers, one below, sandwich everything in, add the other one on top. I much prefer the other one that isn't sticky, and then you can just kind of pin it in place and do it. Anyway, this is what. All right, so here's my sphere, and I've got 10 sections. And typically what I've done in the past is now I've put in chicken wire, and the reason for that was to give it some, when I lay the fabric on top, it doesn't all just kind of sag into it. It gives it, which the metal mesh is also good for. But the other thing is it keeps these sections fairly evenly spaced. So then I thought, well, I could do another round around the middle, because with this sphere, I want to be able to hang it from the middle, because I'm going to cut this out, this top. It's not going to be a complete sphere. It's going to be a sphere that's kind of jagged at the top and open. So I needed something that I could, so I thought, well, let me try this. And that way I'm also avoiding the chicken wire, which I really like. And so I'm just attaching it in places, and I'll continue doing that all the way around, and we'll see how that works. All right, so this is what I've got. This is the screen that I cut out. You can hear how bad my cold is. It's just ridiculous. Second cold in a month. So here's my screen that I cut out, and it's not the shape of anything on that big sphere, but it's a cool shape, and I'm gonna stitch, I'm sort of using it as a template, and I'm kind of creating a sort of patchwork here of different materials. And I singed these edges with, burned them. A kind of, this whole sphere is what remains, so it's kind of a scorched earth kind of thing, and is my thinking. And I'm also going to keep going with this idea, but right now I'm just pinning together a kind of, so I was thinking this, I've got a little hole here. I need to put something in there. That's no big deal. And then maybe, I don't know, some little bit here. Maybe I add some more of this. I've got some more of this. I've got some cool ledger stuff from, this was all from Stockholm. I can't tear it because I've got, which is unfortunate, and that's the only thing about putting the fusible. If I wanted to tear it, I would have to try to pull this off, which I actually don't think I can because it's so old. So I think, I have more of this and I can tear it. Let's see, what else? I have some of this, which I can add just some piece of here, like maybe this part somewhere in here. So that's what I'm doing. I'm kind of playing around, and I'm just sort of adding layers. We'll see what happens. All right, these are the threads I've pulled. So I'm just going to start threading up a bunch of needles so that I can just switch between the needles and not think about it. Let's see, I think I'm going to do actually black. I don't want it to show, but I'm going to do a running stitch this way. Now this is singed, so it's not really holding together. That's okay. We'll just pretend it is. See what happens. All right, so I'm just going to continue this way. The singed part is very delicate, and I don't know if you can see it, but it's kind of well, just ripping right through. Okay, so I don't know that that'll work necessarily. It's okay. Let's see what happens if I do this. Sometimes when I'm doing this kind of stitching, I'll listen to something on YouTube or a podcast. And if it's on YouTube, the algorithm then shows you a bunch of other stuff. So I was looking at, I saw something come up, and it was about the insane asylums of the, when they were first, was it Kirkbride, I think, was the doctor who first designed and so then there were all these institutions that were, in the same kind of format as what he felt was most beneficial. And it was kind of horrifying and interesting all at the same time. This was, in the 1800s, so all these men would institutionalize their wives for, hysteria, or one woman was institutionalized for having peculiar political views, and the treatments that they gave were just absolutely barbaric. Oh, one woman was institutionalized because she wore pants, trousers, and another was put into an institution, and these are insane asylums, right? That was what they were called, and she was put in there against her will by her family for reading too many books. It's just incredible. The attempts, well, not attempts, the way the control, and then what was inflicted. Just horrible, absolutely horrible. And some of these women were put in isolation, the padded cells, sometimes months. I mean, if you weren't crazy before, you would certainly be crazy by the time you got out of there. And I didn't realize that Virginia Woolf was institutionalized. And she writes about it. I knew she was once. I didn't realize that she had been several times. And of course, Sylvia Plath. That was one of my greatest fears when I started seeing a therapist, that if I talked about what was going on, for those of you who follow along, I did a video, my last video was on having an eating disorder. Was about having an eating disorder, and that was my biggest fear, that if I talked about it to a therapist, that they would institutionalize me. I was convinced that I was completely crazy because, I was doing some pretty crazy stuff, and I was just terrified of that. I've stitched quite a lot of this down. I'm using a whole variety of threads, and I am thinking about using some throster on here. I I have this from, I get this throster from Steph Francis. I just love it. It's a great material. You can needle punch it down. And I'm thinking of putting it in here, maybe. And I might use this and couch it down once I've got this on the screen. All right, so now I have my screen here. I've pinned it on here, and I'm going to go ahead and do some of my hand stitching in here, and then I can, I don't know, figure out what I'm doing as far as machine stitching goes. I don't want the machine stitching to show if I have it. So the first thing I'm going to do is tack down some of this. I've got it in a kind of in a crew silken pearl. Just do some random kind of wild looking French knots. I was thinking about change. The kind of change that is not the kind that's overnight. The long term, the bigger changes in life. Slow stitching is such a great kind of meditative way to, it kind of exemplifies that, I guess. It's the sort of slow change that we can really enjoy and savor. But often when there's a large shift, so I'm thinking about when I finally sought help for my eating disorder and started to implement a different way of living. It sounds easy, and it isn't. Or if you think about grief and the stages that you go through and how it feels interminable. But things do shift over time. Or you think about big societal shifts and how it can feel like things are moving quickly. But then when you look back on the history of mankind, it's both fleeting and endless all at once. I'm going to come in with a different thread now. This is the linen mix that I got in Bergen when we went to Scandinavia last summer. But often I think there's this moment, there was for me, it wasn't a single moment, it was many moments, but a feeling of kind of desperation, realizing this isn't working and I have to do something else, but not knowing what that was, having no way to see into the future. And so you make this decision to do things differently. And it's this kind of raw, uncertain place where what was no longer works and what could be hasn't yet happened. So it's like you know too much. You can't go back. But going forward is terrifying. And so there's fear, and there's desperation, and there's uncertainty, and there's tremendous discomfort and doubt. Can I do this? Am I going to be able to pull this off? Is this going to work? But there's something else. It's more than determination. It's a kind of wild hope. And so you take this leap, and at first it's not better, and sometimes it's worse. It's difficult, and it's messy, and sometimes it can be lonely, and it can even feel impossible. But with time and determination and commitment and community, camaraderie, and maybe even failure and picking up and trying again, you begin to build something else, something new, something different. Years can pass before you're able to look back and realize just how far you've come. And maybe even had you known how hard it would be, maybe you wouldn't have even done it. But thankfully you didn't. And you were desperate enough to just take the leap. And so you did. And that's what remains. And that's what this piece is to me. This piece is that space between triumph and just utter despair and desperation. So I want there to be a little bit of both in this. That's what I'm envisioning. Even the stitches I'm using are kind of wonderful metaphors for all of this. So I'm using a lot of knots, right? Conflict, uncertainty. And then here I'm doing seed stitches, planting little seeds that will hopefully grow to become beautiful, flowering plants or strong trees or maybe vegetables, a kind of self-sustaining garden. I'm not here to be on the sidelines anymore. I think as women, we're taught to shrink, to be small, to be passive, to wait our turn. But what I've learned is that the real work, it's often messy and can be angry and It's not linear, is in building a life that aligns with what I care deeply about. I'm not interested in what's considered feminine, if it doesn't include strength and courage. Because to me, feminine is strength and courage and community and camaraderie and tenderness and kindness. And resilience. The act of stitching, burning the fabric, building something out of scraps and torn paper and raw edges. That's a kind of way of leading. I don't mean leading others. I mean leading myself, being the leader of my own life. And not just in my studio, but in my life. Obviously, the sphere isn't finished. It's still a work in progress, much like all of us. I don't know exactly where it's going. I have some pretty good ideas of what I'm thinking and how I think I'm going to proceed, but I'm also open to whatever happens and kind of going with that. And I guess that's what the process of creating has really taught me and continues to teach me about life and art. This idea of having an idea of where I want to go, a goal in mind, but being able to be flexible and fluid enough to change things up depending upon the situations that occur as I proceed. Thanks so much for being here with me. If this resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next video as I continue building what remains.